I want to welcome all of you who are here right now and who are coming in or watching this by video to our Let's Talk number 12 of the Perfect Dozen. This one's about getting your best night's sleep. And I am Dr. Josh Eyer. I'm an assistant professor in the Capstone College of Nursing. I'm the host of the series, and I do research in integrated behavioral health, opioid treatment, LGBTQA+ health, and I do lots of teaching in biostats and methodology. I got my PhD from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte in clinical health psychology in 2012. I got a master's from South Alabama in applied psychology in 2006 and a BA from the University of Virginia in psychology in 2003. And I have with me Dr. Pat Carter. She's the professor and assistant dean for graduate programs in the Capstone College of Nursing, where I am also. So it's always nice to have your boss on your show. She has 20 years of research and scholarly work focused on understanding factors that contribute to quality of life, even at the end of life, for vulnerable populations, specifically behavioral interventions to promote sleep quality in cancer and dementia patients and their caregivers. She is a recognized master educator with numerous awards. She got her PhD from UCLA in nursing science, her master's from UCLA and as a clinical nurse specialist, and her bachelor's, her BSN, from Cal State Fullerton. Okay, so outline, we're going to talk about sleep problems, sleep essentials, some sleep tips, and do some question and answer. And as some of you might have heard earlier, I hopped on Facebook leading up to this talk to ask folks how they're sleeping. My prompt was, how's everyone sleeping? And I got a lot of responses, and you see some of them here. One of my friends, for real though, I usually lay in bed from 11 until around 2 when I actually fall asleep, and then I wake up naturally at 10 or 11. Another said, lots of stress dreams, even though I'm only waking up a couple of times a night. I'm exhausted in the morning because the dreams are so tiring. I'm sleeping fine once I get to bed, but I'm staying up way too late most nights. Horribly, fall asleep, wake up 45 minutes later, fall back asleep, wake up again 45 minutes, in 45 minutes, rinse and repeat. One of my friends said, had many sleep problems in the past, currently falling asleep without a problem, and sleeping pretty well for me for about 5.5 to 6.5 hours. Then I lay in bed for about an hour, wanting to sleep more, but unable. Not sure if it's insomnia of some sort or my body really only wants about 6 hours a night. And then another said, in general, not good it seems. I wake up 2 to 4 times a night. I managed to get 14 hours last night though. How's everyone's dreams been? Mine have been intensely vivid. And then another said, I literally cannot stop thinking about the election. It's not helpful for getting good sleep. So I thought that was a really nice overview of the kinds of problems we're all dealing with right now. Pat, did you want to say anything before I moved on?
Oh, like you say, it's a wonderful breadth of what I'm hearing as well. I didn't do a poll on Facebook, but yeah, everybody who knows me knows that I'm a sleep person, and so they're reaching out saying, is this normal? Is this what I should be expecting now?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay, so what does a best night's sleep even look like? That's what we're going to be talking about first, and then we're going to be taking a bunch of questions. So, all right. Oh, that's an extra slide. I didn't mean to keep in there. All right, why is sleep important? Sleep empowers an effective immune system. Sleep heightens brain function. Sleep enhances mood, and sleep improves mental health. Okay. And how does sleep work? This is where I really have to move stuff off the screen. Okay. Sleep is a delicately balanced, intricate biological process that embeds a cycle within a cycle within a cycle within a cycle. And I'm going to explain those cycles to you, but you can already tell how it could get disrupted in lots of ways. So the first cycle is the individual sleep cycle. And these are cycles we go through during the night where we usually start in a very light sleep, stages 1 and 2. This is where you first fall asleep but are not yet in deep sleep. Then you'll go into stages 3 and 4, where you're in a deep, restful sleep. Your breathing and heart rate slow down and your body is still. You'll get up into stage 5, a REM sleep, and that's where your eyes move under your eyelids, and that's a very active dreaming state. And then we'll drift back down into deeper sleep. So we go like this. So that's one cycle, and then these are embedded in the night cycle. And you'll see you go to sleep, you drop all the way down into deep sleep, you go up to REM, you drop back down into deep sleep. And earlier in the night, as we're going through these cycles, and you'll see that we usually have 4 or 5 cycles in a night, and they average 90, but they start out longer and they tend to get shorter as the night goes on, although that varies between people. So what you'll see is that early in the night, you get a lot more of this deep sleep. That's the physical recovery sleep. And then as the night goes on, you spend more and more time in the REM sleep, where you're getting the mental recovery. Until in your last cycle, you might have very, very little deep sleep and mostly be dreaming. So one of my friends mentioned the vivid sleep he was getting. At the same time, he mentioned that he had slept 14 hours last night. So you can imagine he's spending a lot of time here in the REM state, where he's getting lots of those dreams and remembering them when he wakes up. So this is the 3rd cycle. This is our daily cycle, and this is what sets our body up to prepare to go into sleep. And you'll see here that we have our circadian wake drive. This is just up and down throughout the day, and I'll talk more about that in a second. And then we also have our sleep drive, and over the course of the day, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And so the greatest urge to sleep occurs when you have the greatest distance between the circadian wake sleep drive and this sleep need curve. So then you go to sleep and you see this drive decreases until your circadian drive says, yeah, wake up. And then that's when you wake up and you start that cycle over again. This is directly from Pat's slides. I loved this. I hadn't seen that before. Okay. Oh, I should tell y'all, because I don't think I did, that the slides I'm presenting today are a mix of slides I presented before on sleep and slides that Pat sent me. And so many of these slides come directly from her work. Okay, and then this is the 4th cycle, which is our life cycle. And over the course of our lives, the amount of hormones our body releases related to sleep can vary. And you'll see here that for melatonin, we start out when we're young, having a very strong melatonin levels. And then as we get older, it decreases. And as a result, many people, as a result of this process that is more complex than just melatonin, as we get older, many people have more and more trouble sleeping, and sleep becomes more fragmented. So that melatonin cycle is part of this circadian cycle that I mentioned. Okay, so I told you, it's really intricate. And that's the takeaway point. Because it's so intricate, there are lots and lots of ways that sleep can be disrupted. And we see that in the broad array of different kinds of problems people have. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going into specifics about the problems, because we're going to deal with those more question and answer later. But I do want to say that the fundamental sleep problem is that this intricate balance that I just described, it's outside of our conscious control. We cannot make ourselves fall asleep. We can't lie down and force ourselves to fall asleep. What we have to do is make the conditions right for our sleep, and then allow ourselves to sink down into it. And that's one reason we have so much sleep trouble too, is because we're used to being able to make ourselves do something if we want to. And this is a different process. Okay, so your best night's sleep. How long should I sleep? This is such a great chart that Pat has, and you'll see that newborns, 14 to 17, one of my friends asked me if it was normal to sleep 12 hours a night or something, and my answer was, well, if you're 4 to 11 months old, it definitely is. But we're all different, I know. Sometimes I side conversation with Pat because we actually interact outside. Okay, but I love this chart because it really like well lays out across the lifespan how our need for sleep can change until we get to our teen years. And teens still need 8 to 10 hours, but with high school schedules and job schedules and hanging out schedules, they often get less than this.
Mhm.
So it's a really important, really critical thing that starts to happen in the teenage years, that we get less sleep than we need. And you'll see going into young adult, adult, and older adult years, 7 to 8, 7 to 9 is the expectation for what we'll need. And very few of us, I think, get that very consistently in our lives. So even though we should aim for at least 6 hours of sleep a night, we often don't get that, and we end up in some sleep debt. So we should be thinking about settling that up by getting extra sleep when we can. And the best way to do that is to go to bed a little bit earlier and get up at the times you're used to. So how do you know if you need more sleep? Are you sleeping enough? This is one of Pat's slides of signs to you that you might need some more sleep. If you need an alarm clock to wake up on time, if you sleep through your alarm clock, you're probably not leaving yourself enough time to sleep. If you have a hard time getting out of bed in the morning, or if you feel sluggish in the afternoons, if you get sleepy in meetings, lectures, or warm rooms and need to nap to get through the day, if you get drowsy after heavy meals or when driving, which should be a big danger sign to you, or fall asleep while watching TV or relaxing in the evening, if you feel the need to sleep in on weekends, or if you fall asleep within 5 minutes of going to bed, these are all signs that you may not be sleeping enough. And the thing I always tell people is having a few of these sometimes doesn't mean that you've got a big problem, but if you're experiencing a lot of these regularly, you should be concerned. Okay, so what can disrupt your sleep? Everything. And then I said, okay, nearly everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Physical health, mental health, social factors, lifestyle factors, environmental factors, even things you love, like babies, technology, they can all disrupt your sleep. Okay, so what can you do to get better sleep? Here are some do's and don'ts. They represent a broad amount of information available to you, but it's synthesized here with some quick recommendations, and then we're going to get quickly to question and answer. So here are some do's. Get up at the same time every day. Because your body has those beautiful cycles, you can really upset it by changing when you go to sleep and when you get up. And it's more important to get up at the same time every day to set that cycle on the same, to calibrate that cycle the same every day. Even more important than going to sleep at the same time. Have comfortable bedding and a soft pillow, a dark, quiet, and cool bedroom, but not too cold. You do want to exercise. Exercise helps, but you don't want to do it within 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed, because that'll actually wake you up. A warm bath can help, 20 minutes or so before bedtime, but not too hot. A light snack can help, such as warm milk or banana, but don't do any heavy, spicy, or sugary foods. Soft music, nature sounds, or white noise can be really, really helpful, especially if you're one of those people who wakes up the moment you hear something. That noise can really help you not to do that. Use relaxation techniques to calm down. There are lots of things, but even simple deep breathing exercises can go a long way towards helping you fall asleep. And then knowledge from your doctor about how medication affects your sleep, or about other things that you might be able to do that your doctor can help you with for sleep. And then some don'ts. Don't nap during the day. Okay, that can really disrupt your going to sleep, can disrupt your sleep at night. Don't do caffeine close to bedtime, not after 2 p.m. I am definitely one of those people who used to say that caffeine does not bother my sleep. Okay? Definitely that guy. But I have also weaned myself off caffeine several times in my life. And what I found is that just because I'm wired all the time and manage to fall asleep doesn't mean that it doesn't disrupt my sleep. And during those periods of time when I'm doing less caffeine, I will really notice it. Even a Coca-Cola with dinner can make me stay up till 1 or 2 in the morning. And I'm in one of those moments of my life right now. I use summer and pandemic to wean off of caffeine a lot. And that happened the other night, that I had some Coca-Cola at dinner time. I found myself still awake at 1 o'clock wondering what was going on before I realized. Also, other stimulants, smoking, tobacco products, using those within an hour of bedtime can disrupt your sleep. Alcohol 4 to 6 hours before bedtime can disrupt your sleep. And bright, noisy stimuli, computers, TV, video games. And the thing about those is, the other thing is anything you do in your bed around bedtime can really disrupt your sleep. If it's bright, if it's noisy, if it's going to be really engaging. And the rule of thumb I have about that is if you do anything in your bed besides sleep or sex, you'll do less of both of those.
Mm-hmm.
So good to keep in mind. Okay, so back to the fundamental problem. You can't make yourself fall asleep, but what you can do is treat yourself like a baby. Make your environment perfect. Make the temperature in the room right. Have a soft pillow, a fluffy blanket, have quiet music playing in the background. If you think about treating your body the way you would take care of a baby, it actually gets you most of the way there on ways you can help yourself to sleep better. Okay, so getting back to the questions, I'm just going to read these off one by one, Pat, and you can answer them. And we'll also be taking questions from you guys who are attending. So go ahead and put your questions into the chat, and I'll ask Pat when I see them. So the prompt I put on Facebook was, if you could ask a sleep expert any question, what would it be? And of course, I have snarky friends, and the first comment was, how much do you sleep? And I answered that.
Yeah. So the answer to that one is it actually depends on the day and depends on everything that's going on, because just because I'm a sleep expert doesn't mean that I sleep expertly all the time. But I do know what to do, and I do know how to conceptualize my experience if I've slept poorly. Instead of saying, oh, I had a bad night's sleep last night, oh my gosh, I'm going to worry about it all day long. And when I go to bed tonight, oh my gosh, I'm going to have another bad night's sleep. I immediately, when I wake up in the morning, go, boy, I'm primed for a good night's sleep tonight.
Oh, that's
good.
So
you cognitively reframe those things. And then I know throughout the day, because last night I did have a bad night's sleep. I had some dental work done and it decided to keep me awake last night. So, but I knew today, okay, well, there's a couple of things that I need to do. I need to make sure that I'm a little bit more careful about the decisions that I make. I need to make sure that I really keep my caffeine early in the day. So normally I might say not after noon. This morning I said not after 10 a.m. because I know I'm very sensitive to caffeine. So I'm going to do everything I can to reinforce being well primed to sleep tonight. So
that's good.
Yeah,
I like that. I think that's a really helpful thing for people to actually enact. Those kinds of, I'm a psychologist, those kinds of cognitive sort of somersaults that we can do to help ourselves see things from a different angle can actually have a huge impact.
Right.
So we have some questions in the chat.
Okay.
Hi, Shabby and Quack. It's good to see you all. Thanks for being here. One of them is, has anyone ever told you that playing games on their electronics makes them sleepy?
Actually, I have heard that, because what you may be doing is you may be using that game activity as a relaxation activity. So even though we typically tell people don't play games or don't engage in your electronics right before you go to bed, because of the light and the excitement. If it's an exciting game, it's going to engage you and keep your mind active. But if it's an activity that is relaxing to you, that is distracting from the stressors of the day, you may have actually, and you do it on a regular basis, you may have actually incorporated it into your getting ready for bed night routine. Now, you may want to choose a different activity, especially if you are very sensitive to light. Like teenagers tend to be extremely sensitive to light. It's very easy for their melatonin to cut off and not let them go to sleep well in the evening. and they tend to be not sensitive at all to light in the morning, so it's really hard for them to wake up. But it may be that that activity is something that you incorporated into your life to be a relaxation, stress reduction activity.
That's really nice advice. I also play games sometimes before I go to bed. And so what I always tell people is like, because I'm one of you, I know how this works, right? Like I do get so sleepy I go to bed eventually, but it's usually an hour later than I would have. And so for a good sleep, what I always say is read a research article or book, or things that like would put you to sleep when you're wide awake, because it will work. Like we know those things work. And video games will probably keep you up longer.
Yeah. I love watching this show on the Science Channel called How It's Made. And so they talk about how to make roller skates and how to make springs and how to make, because I just sort of like that kind of stuff. But I know that the minute I start feeling sleepy, I can shut it off and not feel like I'm going to be deprived because I don't get to see the end of it. So a lot of times if we're reading something that's really interesting, or we're watching something on TV, or we're playing a game that we're really engaged in, we tend to let time go by. And then before you know it, like you say, you're awake an hour later than you maybe intended to be. So thinking.
All right, we've got great
questions
going in. Yeah. How do you find the perfect pillow? And it goes along with the question one of my friends asked me, what type of pillow should a side sleeper use to properly support the neck?
Right. So your perfect pillow is going to be one that you like to sleep with. And so some people hate feather. Some people are allergic to it and they want down, or they want something else, or they like the foam. Some people get really hot with a pillow, with a foam pillow, and so they'll try different kinds of things. But essentially, it's the pillow that works best for you. Now, I'm one of those people that I actually have 3 pillows in my room, because some nights I know that my neck is a little bit stiff, and so I'm probably going to spend a lot of my time sleeping in a particular position. And so I'll choose to start the night with that pillow. But I have 3 pillows besides my bed. I start the night with 1 pillow, and I oftentimes switch out those pillows throughout the night for comfort. And I always have a body pillow so that if I'm laying on my side, I can, support different parts. So it really is a trial and error, and do not be fooled by, oh, well, this pillow costs $50, so it must be good. You're just going to have to try it out, and don't be swayed by whatever pillow is best for your bed partner. I've been married for 35 years, and my husband says, why do you need 3 pillows? Because I need 3 pillows. I can't just choose the pillow that you use and have used for the last 50 years. So that is definitely a personal decision.
I used to do survival camping and stuff like that, where you'd go out in the woods with nothing, and I could sleep on a picnic table with nothing, right?
Yeah, with a rock underneath your head.
When I was younger. And then sometime in my 20s, I started like having a specific type of pillow that worked for me. And now I'm to the point where I think about taking it with me anywhere I go, because I can sleep with almost nothing as long as I have that pillow.
Yep.
All right. So one of the questions, most strategies are easy to implement with effort, no coffee, relaxing, etc. The psychological part is hardest for me. How do I stop thinking about work, life, etc. when in bed, when I'm trying to keep my mind blank to be able to go to sleep faster?
Okay, so the hardest time that you will ever have to make your mind blank is when you try to make your mind blank. So that's number 1. What I do and what I recommend most frequently is to have people, when they know that they're coming, they oftentimes come to bed with a lot of thoughts that are going to be racing around, is that they designate a particular time, generally an hour and a half or so before you're getting ready to go to bed, to intentionally sit down and think about those things. Make a list for yourself. A lot of times people are really worried they're going to forget something tomorrow. So make that list, intentionally give yourself some mindful time to process those thoughts, And then when they start to visit you when you're getting ready to go to bed, you can say, nope, I've already done that. I know it's on my list. I don't have to think about it right now. So you're sort of giving yourself an opportunity to, you're basically saying, well, I've already taken care of that. Another thing that I suggest as well is to have a ready-made substitution. So what I mean by a substitute thought. So what I mean by that is sometimes when even though I've done the pre-processing and when I'm stressed, things will sort of invade my thoughts, is I know something that is really very relaxing to me is to see water trickling like in a brook, right? So I have some particular places that I like to go to see that. And I can visualize those places. I don't think about them through words. I don't say, okay, there's the water going over the rocks and I'm processing it in word form. I just look at it like I'm looking at a picture on the wall or I'm watching a video and I'm just experiencing it. And what that does is that shuts off that brain thinking verbal processing piece and switches my brain over into just the experience, the calming experience of it. Take a few deep breaths, just picture the water rushing by over the rocks, and then I can fall asleep. So I've got that substitute thought primed and ready to plug in, because the worst thing you can do is if you say, don't think about pink elephants for the next 5 years. 5 years, 5 minutes. All you can do is think about pink elephants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great advice. One of the things about the lists of concerns or thoughts is the more you do that, the better it works.
Right.
So sticking with it for 2 or 3 weeks and making yourself do it, you'll find that it's working much better at the end of that. And then for the thinking about something thing that you said, I recommend to people that they remember one of their favorite memories. They go back in time to something and just like remember everything they can about it.
Right.
Over time, you get more and more immersed in that memory, and then next thing you know, you're sleeping and probably having a good dream.
Yeah.
So,
Priming yourself for a good dream.
Yeah. So we got tons of questions. This is awesome.
Hey.
I have narcolepsy, and when I accidentally fall asleep while putting my son to bed, I wake up after about 10 minutes having had very vivid dreams. I also have a strange feeling like my head is dizzy and wasn't ready to wake up yet. What is happening?
Okay, so narcolepsy is extremely complex, and I am not your physician, and I am not giving you advice on that. So first off, that caveat, see your neurologist, be managed that way. But what you're experiencing are two cardinal signs of narcolepsy. One, you're falling asleep without the intention of falling asleep. And oftentimes when you're feeling a strong emotion, like you might be feeling a lot of love towards your child, or you might be feeling excitement and you sort of fall asleep at a time that you wouldn't expect to be falling asleep. And secondly, that residual sort of waking up experience is actually something that people will experience something that's even as far as a sleep paralysis. So they'll wake up and not be able to move, but they know they're awake, but they can't move. Okay. So those are cardinal signs, and narcolepsy is an extremely fascinating condition if you're not having to live with it. Right. So from my perspective, to get to study it, it's extremely fascinating. It's horribly frustrating when you're somebody who's having to live with it. But it's something that it's really sort of, the brain is just amazing. But in narcolepsy, the brain is trying to figure out if it's supposed to be awake or is it supposed to be asleep. And it's not as simple, like Josh was saying, to just sort of flip a light switch or one cycle. There's so many interplaying things there. But essentially, that's what you're experiencing is two cardinal symptoms. So if you didn't already know that you had narcolepsy, I would say maybe you need to be checked out for narcolepsy. Those are two cardinal symptoms.
There's another question here from someone who emailed you. It's about melatonin and CPAP.
Yeah.
But Before you answer that, I want everyone to know that we're going to do our best to get to all of the questions. The questions are rolling in. That's awesome. And I'm going to try to keep us moving so that we can see all of them. If any of your questions don't get answered, feel free to email us. And also, coming up on November 2nd, we're going to have a special program with the wellness called the Sleep More, Stress Less program. That we're both involved in, and it's a great program. It runs for a long period of time, and it gives you a lot of information about sleep and techniques that will help you with a lot of different kinds of problems that people have with their sleep. So check that out at the Wellbama website, and I'm sure Carolyn will share a link with y'all if you need it about how to do that. So Pat, what answer do you have for that question?
So which one am I focusing on?
So the person who's taking, she emailed you, is taking melatonin.
Okay. Oh, yes, taking melatonin.
Yes.
And so really, when we're looking at melatonin, and this individual acknowledged it in the email that, you know, our body naturally makes melatonin. That's our natural, I would call it the sleepy hormone. So it's what drives your circadian rhythm, and it's what helps you be able to fall asleep and stay asleep. Fortunately or unfortunately, I tend to lean towards the unfortunately, the nutraceutical department, sort of industry. So not the pharmaceutical industry that's regulated by the FDA, but the nutraceutical industry, which is, you know, picks up your fish oil and, you know, your CoQ10s and your turmeric and your melatonin, right, are not regulated as closely as, say, our pharmaceuticals are. So first off, you're not really sure what you're getting when you take those pills. So that's the first caveat. Secondly, the individual mentioned that they were taking a particular dosage, 10 milligrams of melatonin. That's actually extremely high. Okay. Typically, we will recommend, if we recommend people to use melatonin at all, we typically recommend between 0.5 milligram up to 5 milligrams. So 10 milligrams is already double the maximum dose that we tend to recommend, rather than, you know, the smaller dosages. We also tend to recommend that you make sure that you're timing the medication at the right time, or you're timing taking the melatonin at the right time, because it does help you to feel sleepy. But if you take it at the wrong time in your circadian cycle, it can actually make it harder for you to fall asleep and harder to wake up on the other end. So you need to be careful about when you take it. I generally recommend that people who have been taking melatonin for a while begin to try to cut themselves back on it, and tend to try to use some other things that will strengthen your circadian rhythm, like when are you exposed to light? Because unless you're blind, your melatonin, your natural melatonin, is going to come on and go off in your brain based on your light exposure. So if you're getting bright light in the morning, you're waking up at the same time every day, like Josh said, and you're getting bright light in that first 30 minutes to an hour of waking up. So turn on all your lights in the house, get some sun, go outside to have your coffee and your sunshine in the morning. That will set your circadian rhythm in such a way that it will help you to have a regular cycle. But if you've been taking 10 milligrams of melatonin every night for a period of time, your body's now sort of expecting it to be there. It's part of your nighttime routine. And so you need to wean yourself off of that, not just stop taking it and expect that everything's going to be okay. So it's a complex question, but it's also one of the ones that I get the most, because it seems like an easy fix. You know, I can have the sleepy time tea, and I can have my melatonin chewables with sugar, and I'll get the sleep that I'm desiring, but it's not necessarily the best route.
And that graph I showed doesn't help, because it looks like I must need lots of melatonin to have the same amount as the baby. But that's not really how it works.
And in fact, we typically, when we do give melatonin, we do prescribe it. First off, we do a blood test to see what levels are you having. So we wouldn't give somebody insulin just because they want to lose weight, but if they're not diabetic, right? We need to check and see. Melatonin is a hormone just like the insulin is a hormone in your body, and it's very finely tuned to your personal need. But some people do have low melatonin levels, and we see that a lot in children who have who sometimes experience some ADH kinds of things. And again, I'm not trying to diagnose anybody. I'm just sort of giving some examples of when we see it. So we might prescribe some melatonin in those days. We absolutely use it a lot with people who are blind, because again, if they're totally blind, they're not going to get the light signals that will track our circadian rhythm. And so then they get what's called non-24 syndrome. And so then they end up, they might start their day at 7 o'clock, then 8 o'clock, then 9 o'clock, then 10 o'clock. And before you know it, they're starting their day at 10 p.m. instead of 10 a.m. because they don't have those cues, those light cues.
There's a follow-up question here about what time in the day is best to take melatonin.
Generally about an hour before you intend to go to sleep. So again, you have to be thinking about, I'm going to go to sleep I'm going to get in bed and try to go to sleep at 10, not try, but I'm going to go to bed and turn off the lights around 10 o'clock p.m. So you're going to take it at 9, not generally any more earlier than that. You also need to be really careful the first time you ever try melatonin that you don't really have anything planned for the next day, because again, you never know exactly how strongly you're going to respond to that, and you might feel groggy well into the next day if the dosage is not exactly right for you.
There's a question here about will slides or recordings of the webinar get posted somewhere? Can we get slides via email? Yes, the recording is going to be posted on the Wellbama website under webinars, and you'll be able to view that later with the slides and everything. Okay, so we have a couple of questions. We have a question about what someone should do if they don't like sleeping on a pillow, but I don't really know what the question is.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked for more information. Pat, do you know what that question is for?
I don't know what that question is, but again, if you don't like or you don't feel comfortable sleeping on a pillow, then you don't have to use a pillow,
There's a question here about, do weighted blankets have a real benefit?
They actually have a benefit, not so much from sleep. They have the benefit that they serve is for relaxation purposes. So it's just like in babies, when we swaddle them, in infants, when they're very young, if we swaddle them, they feel more secure. It's like giving yourself a hug. So if you have a weighted blanket, it actually feels like you're giving yourself a hug, which helps your body and your brain to release serotonin, which serotonin is that lovely I feel happy hormone. You feel happy and you feel secure, you're going to fall asleep. So it's not a direct correlation to helping you sleep, but it's a relaxation that will help you. Again, personal preference. For me, weighted blankets would go great. For my husband, who doesn't even like to have a sheet on him, forget it. It would drive him nuts. So personal preference.
I have several friends who swear by them, but it can also be part of your ritual to put the weighted blanket on and stuff before going to sleep.
Right.
Okay, so we have a question here. I have sleep apnea and use a CPAP. I usually go to sleep fast, not long after I put the mask on. But sometimes I wake up thinking it's time to get up, only to find out it's only 11:30, and then I wake up about every hour after that. What causes this, and how can I sleep longer between each time?
Okay. You may have a combination. Oftentimes we think that we either have sleep apnea or we have insomnia, but we're actually recognizing that oftentimes conditions can coexist. So your sleep apnea may actually be well controlled by your CPAP, but you may be, by waking up, depending on what your thoughts are when you wake up and the stress or the anxiety that you may have because, oh my God, it's happening again and I'm not going to be able to get back to sleep, you may actually be triggering some insomnia symptoms. So it may be that your sleep apnea is very well controlled by your CPAP. Sounds like it is if you're sleeping well for at least a few hours after you go to bed. But then we need to work with you about, okay, what are your thoughts and what are your reactions that you're experiencing when you do wake up? Because it's natural for people to wake up. Generally 2 to 3 hours after they go to bed, it's natural for us to wake up and actually need to go to the bathroom and pee because we're getting rid of some of those extra fluids we don't need. But it's what do you do on your way back to bed once you get there? Because you should be able to just fall right back to sleep. But you may have some thoughts intruding in that may be triggering some insomnia, which the good thing about that, it's much easier to treat than sleep apnea. So take our sleep class because we'll be teaching you about all of those things.
So I had several of my friends note that they were sleeping for 45 minutes and then waking up, or an hour and waking up throughout the night. Do you have any advice for folks who have that going on separate from?
Yeah, typically what I see, again, I'd have to do a comprehensive analysis of everything that's going on with them. But typically what I see there is we get so tired that we go to bed and we fall asleep almost instantaneously. And then we get a little bit of rest to recharge all of that energy, and now we're awake again. And typically what's happening there is even though you fell asleep, you were exhausted, you really weren't in a restful state to be able to fall into deep sleep. So it takes you about 45 minutes to an hour to start entering that deep sleep stage, like Josh showed you on those stages where you go down into that deep slow wave sleep. If your brain thinks that you're too stressed to be safe in that deep of sleep, as soon as you start to try to enter into that deep slow wave sleep, it's going to wake you back up. And then you're going to go back down and it's going to wake you up again. And you're going to go down and you're going to wake up. And that's that 45-minute to 60-minute cycle that's going to pop you in and out. And so again, that's where you can, take our class, and we'll help you to be able to stress less, sleep better, and to be able to know how to prepare yourself, prepare your environment psychologically, physically, to let yourself be vulnerable enough to get into that deep sleep and stay there.
And I'll tack on about psychological things. It's really common for people with trauma to re-experience aspects of the trauma in their dreams.
Yes.
To have that disrupt their dreams and with nightmares and things like that. And over a long period of time, those people can actually train themselves to wake up from REM, so that they actually don't get good dream sleep.
Right.
So if you've got some psychological factors playing in, that might be part of what your cure needs to be for that, to speak to a professional about the trauma and the experience of remembering in your sleep. Okay. Other than him moving to another room, any tips for someone whose partner snores and interrupts their sleep? You never hear that one.
Get them a sleep study because they probably have sleep apnea and it needs to be treated. And sometimes, so it's interesting, sleep apnea, or what we call, it could even be something as minor as what we call sleep disordered breathing. So heavy snoring without having apneic or loss of breathing episodes and so forth can happen as well. But it's really, really interesting because people will often go an average of 17 years before they're treated for sleep apnea. They will experience it. People will tell them, you've snored since you were a child. We had this, across, it's like a freight train that comes through when you fall asleep on the couch. People who have sleep apnea don't know that they have sleep apnea unless somebody tells them. And you may be the person that somebody says, oh my God, you snore. And you're like, I don't snore. I've never heard it. Well, of course you haven't, because you're in the midst of it. But what drives people in to get therapy, to get treatment for sleep apnea, is their bed partners. Their bed partners say, enough of this. I've had it. I'm done. Or the physiological symptoms that they experience as side effects. People with sleep apnea have higher blood pressure. They have diabetes. They have a weight gain. They have migraine headaches. They have impotence. So they have fertility issues, both male and female. So there's a number of different things that will finally drive people to be able to get some therapy. And it doesn't all have to be a CPAP machine. There's actually a number of different ways that you can get therapy. And if you have been in and you've received a CPAP machine, sorry, I just have to take a breath here, is that just because you got it 10 years ago doesn't mean that it's still the right dosage for you, or that it's the right machine for you, or you would not drive a 10-year-old car if you could get a brand new one today. The bells and whistles are different. The mask that you're wearing is likely different. If you've gained weight, if you've lost weight, if anything has happened to you, you probably need to be reevaluated again to make sure that it's still the right prescription for you and that you're getting the therapy you need.
And we've got a comment here saying, you are so right about this. Somebody's
Yay!
husband had snored
Positive affirmation.
and got a sleep study and a CPAP, and now he sleeps quietly and soundly. Follow-up question, because I do hear this fairly often too from people, and this is a follow-up to the question that you just answered. The snoring husband has had 2 recent sleep studies, and they say he does not have sleep apnea, but you can hear his snoring all over the house.
Right. So he may not have sleep apnea in that, because apnea means that an apneic episode means that you stop breathing for at least 10 seconds for a certain period of time, or for at least 10 seconds, and your oxygen saturation drops. So it's very clinical exactly what sleep apnea means. But the snoring, when you think about snoring, what it's the airway, it's the air trying to pass through your airway, and the tissues in your airway, your nose, your mouth, your tongue, your throat, are vibrating. When it's like when you try to whistle, it's the air vibrating through there that's causing the snoring. So if he does not have sleep apnea, the next step on your potential treatment pathway is to find out, okay, well, does he have a deviated septum? Is there something going on in his nose or throat? And so I have people go to see ear, nose, and throat doctors, so ENT doctors, because sometimes what you need is balloon sinuplasty in your nose, and it gets rid of that extra tissue that's there. It opens up your airway. You open the airway, the snoring goes away. We hear it a lot in children before they have their tonsils and their adenoids removed, or until they grow and they get a bigger airway to work with. We'll hear a lot of snoring there. So that's what snoring is it's a restricted airway through some tissue, that air trying to move through and vibrating. So just because he hasn't been diagnosed specifically with sleep apnea, you don't have to still just tolerate the snoring. Go to and I guess if I give one take home, just because you don't get the answer you're looking for in one place, if the issue persists, you be persistent and look for the next specialist that might be able to help you. Specialists are wonderful, but by the nature of their education and training, they're very narrow. And so if you see a neurologist, they're only going to see the neuro stuff. If you see a pulmonologist, they're only going to see the respiratory stuff. So keep being persistent.
Here's a question. I have insomnia and am able to fall asleep. However, I tend to wake up after about 3 to 4 hours with my mind racing. Then I'm up for the rest of the night.
Yep.
What should I do?
Yep. And so typically what happens if you have insomnia is, again, it's like that pattern that I explained earlier, where you fall into some sleep and then you wake up and fall into sleep and wake up. It is very, very common for people with lifelong insomnia to only be able to get about a maximum of 4 hours at one time. We can work with you to try to stretch that out to a little bit longer period of time. But sometimes what you end up having to do is you end up having to plan for another 4-hour block of time within that same 24-hour period of time. So sometimes this is triggered with some people. I've worked with a lot of veterans that say, well, when I was on the ship, when I was in the Navy, we could only sleep for 4 hours. I did that for the first 15 years of my life, and now that's my pattern. But 4 hours isn't enough, but I can't sleep for more than 4 hours at a time. Well, when you think about it, 4 hours is 3 sleep cycles. That's 3 full sleep cycles. Not quite enough, so you need to get at least another 2 hours, but another 4-hour block within that same 24-hour period of time is actually like you went to the gas station twice and filled up your gas tank, right? Instead of filling it all up in one fell swoop, you went to the gas station twice in that same day, 24-hour period of time, and filled it up.
And I always like to add that that's a really common human experience, that it used to be really common for us to go to sleep, especially in the long winter nights, to go to sleep, wake up in the middle of the night for a while, and then go back to sleep.
Yes.
And it was called our second sleep.
Yep.
And you can read about it in old books and stuff. And there are cultures like Spain where they have siestas in the middle of the day. It's a very common thing.
Yeah, the problem with that cycle is that people become frustrated after that first 4 hours. And it's like, and then I'm just up. And it's like, okay, so you're up. Maybe you're up for 2 hours, maybe you're up for 3 or 4 hours, maybe you're up for 6 hours, and then you get your second sleep. And that's actually the way that our body likes as human beings to sleep, especially like you say in the winter months.
So one of the questions here is, why have I never been able to be a morning person despite how many hours of sleep I get or how early I go to bed?
Because you are genetically predetermined to be a night owl. We finally, in about the last 3 to 5 years, have been able to genetically identify morning larks, night owls, and the people that can move in between those times. And it has to do with your sensitivity to light and your melatonin and all of those kinds of things. But I love to be able to tell people, you just are what you are because that's the way you were made. Your parents made you that way genetically. And so embrace it and try to get a night job instead of a day one.
And I missed this question earlier, I'm sorry, but I'm glad it was asked again. How come I twitch so much in sleep? I fall asleep quickly and do not feel groggy throughout the day, but the second I fall asleep, my hands and feet twitch every single night, sometimes violently, and it wakes me up. Is this normal? Can I do anything to stop it?
Yes, it's normal to a certain degree. It's something that we recognize and we acknowledge. It's something that's called periodic limb movement. Oftentimes it's called PLM or periodic leg movement, people will call it, but it's actually periodic limb movement. So it could be your arms, it could be your legs. If you experience this after you've fallen asleep, it's called periodic limb movements. It might, like you say, wake you up like you see your dog running when they're dreaming, right? It's the same kind of a thing. If you experience it, these twitching and things as you're attempting to fall asleep and it doesn't let you fall asleep, it's what we call restless leg. So something that's occurring, those sensations or those tinglings that occur as you're attempting to try to fall asleep is called restless leg, and it's generally only relieved if you get up and move around. That's why we call it restless leg. But the twitchings that you experience in the middle of the night that might wake you up, those are typically called periodic limb movements. The best treatment for periodic limb movements is to do some stretching, some yoga stretching and things before you go to bed. If you're really active, if you're a runner, if you're doing those kinds of things and you're not stretching well before you go to bed, oftentimes we'll see that that periodic limb movement, twitchings and so forth. But as long as you're not kicking your bed partner, you're probably, and you're waking up rested, it's probably not something you need to worry too much about. But there are some things you could do. Yeah.
And YouTube has some great free videos for nighttime yoga or bedtime yoga. Quick question, does a new CPAP machine require a new sleep study?
Not necessarily. I would reach out to, if you still know the sleep doc that you went to for your CPAP machine, you can reach out to them. You can also contact your insurance company that paid for it initially and ask them, can I get a new machine or do I have to get a new study? Depending on how long you've had the machine, it may be a good thing for you to be evaluated again, because that CPAP settings, those settings they put on there, is like a prescription. It's like getting a blood pressure medication or getting your diabetes medication. That CPAP setting is actually a prescription that the sleep doc has come up with based on what they saw from your study.
One of my friends asked me, will you watch my 2-month-old so I can get some damn sleep?
That's what grandparents are for.
Right.
I do that for my grandbabies and my great grandbabies now. Yeah, it's really, really a hard time to try and figure out how do you sleep. This is why young people are so fertile, because they have the resilience to be able to live through not sleeping well when their children are small.
Oh my goodness. I got several versions of this question. Do dreams or nightmares have an effect on how rested you feel in the morning? If you sleep 8 hours but had an intense dream, are you still going to be tired?
The intensity of the dream doesn't necessarily make for better or worse sleep. So it really sort of depends. That's another individual thing. If you're having a recurrent nightmare, that's when you need some therapy to be able to get through that trauma and work through why are you doing this, and maybe script a new end to that nightmare, which we find is very helpful. But having intense dreams doesn't necessarily disrupt your sleep, because part of your night is supposed to be spent in those dreams.
Yeah, I think I wish we had more time. Hopefully we can get to it later, but the scripting a new end can be really powerful for nightmares. Yeah. How little sleep can I get by with and still have an optimum health, or still have optimum health? I wish I didn't have to sleep at all.
Oh, I love people who will finally, feel empowered enough to ask that question. Right. Research-wise, we know that 93% of the population, approximately 93 to 97% of the population, genetically requires at least 6 hours of sleep every 24 hours in order to not suffer negative consequences. Okay, so that means the high blood pressure, the gaining weight, the migraine, so forth, right? But what that doesn't answer is the question of how much sleep do I need to be able to function optimally? Now, functioning optimally is a personal prescription for you, right? And until you allow yourself to fall asleep when you're sleepy and wake up when you're fully rested without an alarm clock, you don't really know what your personal sleep preference time is. And until you have had that sleep vacation and you're well rested and fully rehydrated from your sleep debt, you don't really know what optimal performance is. Because just like if we have a nip of alcohol, we may say, sure, I can drive. We become less capable of determining our own functional ability the more sleep deprived we are. And so you'll never really know what optimal is until you test it out after having really good sleep.
And as humans, we're really good at figuring out how to keep going, and we can do it without even realizing that we're not at optimal levels.
And I try to conceptualize this, for the longest time, we as a society have said, I'll sleep when I'm dead, sleep is for the weak, you know, strong people or successful people never sleep, or they only got 4 hours, or Einstein only did this or that or the other, you know, and I've heard them all. Believe me, I've heard them all. But how I try to conceptualize this is what sleep does is sleep. I'm not robbing myself, my wake time by sleeping, right? What I'm doing is by sleeping, priming myself to be the best person I can be when I'm awake. I'm going to think more clearly. I'm going to look more attractive to the people around me and to myself. I'm going to process things better. I'm going to feel less pain. All of my wake time is being primed for being the best that it can be and the enjoyment that I can have if I sleep well. So it's like paying myself forward to be able to have a good day by sleeping. I'm not robbing myself from my wake time.
Awesome. And we are past 1 o'clock. Pat, thank you so much for being on here.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for joining us. There's another Let's Talk coming up in October that is going to be about motivating yourself for health behavior change. And please check out the Sleep More, Stress Less program coming up in November. And I'll see y'all soon.
Yes,
Thank you again, Pat.
And if you have questions for Josh or I, you can get our emails and we'll be happy to answer them for you. Thank you, everybody, for taking part today. Great questions.
Yay. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.